Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. On today's show, we have Steve Byrne, Executive Vice President of FSG. Well, he's got a short bio like mine. I love it. He's after serving in the Air Force and attending the University of Texas in Austin, Steve helped start the company in 1982 in San Antonio, Texas. Today, he leads the lighting and distribution business. He's done a lot of work, different places, Starbucks, renovations, Bloomin's brands, new store construction, retrofits, city, state, school lighting projects, all sorts of stuff. It's going to be fun to talk to him. It's the second time he's a guest on the show, so look forward to this one. It's always better the second time, right? Before we go there, Greggy, we got to get crazy here on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. We got to go to tcpi.com, the craziest folks in lighting.
So you know how crazy they are? They have a new product they're calling their corn cob killer.
Oh.
So what this is a high lumen LED filament lamp. And they say, yeah, it's real. 200 lumens per watt is what they're getting out of this. So they have up to a 30 watt bulb. So that means 6,000 lumens. I did that math real quick. You see, 30 times 200. And it is the size of an HID lamp. So it'll fit. That's the other issue you always run into with corn cobs is the size of them. This is designed to fit that size. It's a 4K, 5K, and they're going to have 22K for high pressure sodium. So check out the corn cob killer.
The corn cob killer. I love it. And of course, go to tcpi.com, longtime members of Greg, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. That's right. Where lighting means business, folks. We're getting together. That's right. We're back. We're hitting it up with the ArcLight Summit, September 13th. That's right. Come on down. Join us. Go to naild.org, baby. But right now, Steve, what's happening, brother?
Well, 2022 is here, and we've come through some pretty crazy times the last couple of years, and we're focused. We're as focused as we've ever been on the business. We're really excited about what the possibilities are in lighting, in spite of everything that you hear about all of the supply chain issues and everything else in the world. There's still a tremendous amount of demand out there, and I think my gut says we're on the verge of a renaissance in lighting. I think it's only going to continue to grow and expand.
I love that. We're gonna dive into questions regarding that. But I did something today, Mike, that I don't think I've ever done in the 300 some shows that we've had. I had to go back and listen to our first episode with Steve. It was episode 129. We recorded it pre-COVID. We released it post-COVID, and it's still as relevant today as ever. So I highly encourage you. You're going to listen to this one, but also go back to episode 129 and check that out because there's a lot more questions and specific FSG related that we get into on that. So that was a good time. I just thought that was interesting to actually go back and do that. And some of the things, and that's what I want to talk to you, Steve, is kind of an update. So people that listen to that or had listened to that, I want to ask you some things still to see what's changed maybe in the last couple of years. So, and you guys might not remember what your answers were, but I'm gonna tell you what they were.
Okay.
So, at the time, your business was about 30% lighting, and the rest was electrical. That was 2 years ago. How's it looking now?
Construction has actually grown faster than lighting, so it's about 20/80 right now because a lot of big construction projects have taken over. So our top line growth, 2020 was quite a contraction in a lot of places because of the whole pandemic shutting things down. So we had large scale customers that just didn't even have facilities open. So that was a dent there. But construction projects that were going continued. And so that was sort of the saving grace. And then backlogs came back out. So that was kind of what we saw in 2021. And now, 2022, what I've learned through it all is forecasting still remains a dark art. So,
amen, brother.
There's another one you had here. How about the number of branches? Back then, 2 years ago, you had 30. I think you rounded up or whatever.
Yeah, and we're still at 30. So we've not really expanded. We didn't acquire anybody, or we didn't open any additional branches. And I think, in today's view is we're taking a lot more focused effort on maybe particular verticals and trying to grow in those areas and utilizing the resources that we have on the ground. So no branch expansion, and we kind of stretch from San Diego to New York City, so we we touch a lot of places.
But I think the bigger part of that is you didn't close any down. I guess that's where I was wondering about more. And you went right to the expansion mode. You're saying we didn't grow, but we didn't close any. So that's a big part of it, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was. The one thing we did face when you remember it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and we thought, okay, it's going to be a 2 week thing, and then 2 weeks turned into 2 years, and we'd never faced, at least in our lighting business, that we had to furlough people or we had to reduce force because the workload just dropped, and we were of a size that we didn't qualify for PPP, and we didn't qualify for any of the large scale stuff. So, our defense mechanism was right sizing the business as much as possible. And I'd never faced that in 38 years in the lighting business. Never had to furlough anyone or lay anyone off. And that was a sort of an unpleasant part of,
Mm-hmm.
what came out of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the new construction that you mentioned, that's where a lot of growth has been. Has it been a certain industry? I mean, I can tell in my area what it is, but I'm curious nationwide what you're seeing the most growth in.
The financial sector continues to grow. They're still building financial institutions out there. I think education is going to be solid. The big part that has probably had the hiccup is finish out and existing commercial space, that kind of thing. Because when people stop going into offices, they stop doing things to them. So I believe that's going to rebound now, though, because there is a awful lot of buzz about it's time for people to get back into the office and get back to
Mm-hmm.
work. So
It's true. There's a lot of that out there.
And of those new construction projects, this is maybe an impossible number to come up with, but what do you think? What would you estimate the percentage of those projects had controls involved? LED, like advanced. Well,
uh,
let's just say controls.
yeah, controls. I think controls are still one of those things that's talked about on every single
It's another
project.
dark art, brother.
It's a really dark art. It's the technology is out in front of our ability to understand it, I think. So, uh,
I don't
but
think that's the right exact way I would put it. I would say the technology's out in front of the value proposition. That's
yeah,
what I would
that
say. It's a better way to kind
that's
of consolidate it, I mean, when
yeah.
I look at controls, the most obvious application I see is with the dark sky guys. Like, why not
Hmm.
municipalities? Why not these people? Why don't they want to control their streetlights? To
Yeah.
me, and I never hear anyone talking about that in the lighting industry. And to me, it's the simplest, most obvious example of where you could tune, dim, brighten, cut off, and you could have pay someone to manage the system 24 hours a day. And I never hear, and I love the folks at PNNL that study this, and I love all the industry people that are in this talking about it. But Steve, I never hear anyone saying to me what I think is the most obvious application for the deployment of this technology.
Well, you're not alone in that because I haven't heard that either.
Mm,
The nearest I've heard to that, we had an inquiry a few weeks back from one of our clients that was asking about if we had ever done colored street lightings in municipalities. The
mm.
idea of turning on different colors, and we searched far and wide and hadn't seen that. So uh,
It's a
maybe that's
vacuum, man.
something
I'm
that
telling
is.
you right now. I'm not in that game, FSG's not in that game. We're downstream, and so
Yeah,
we have no idea how to solve that problem for a client right now. And you
yeah.
just heard it from Steve here. I talked about it a little bit on the Restoring Darkness podcast. The controls guys, the obvious business case to take all that technology you have and apply it right now is outdoor, not indoor, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, very
So,
interesting.
Steve, on that point, what do you think the percentage is? I don't know if you ever gave a number. I think you just said that maybe not as
Uh,
many as you think.
what projects have controls?
Yeah,
I
of
can
new
tell you in some.
construction.
Yeah, I can tell you we have some clients that every single facility they build has a control system on it, or a version of that. So I think they're probably spec or linked in almost all of them. Uh,
Okay.
when you said percentage, my mind went to what percentage of the lighting package is
Mm.
related to controls, and I think that's depending on how sophisticated they go, somewhere between maybe 5 and 15 of what they do there. So, and what I will say, we still have an awful lot of projects that they get a control system put in, and 2 months later you get a phone call, and the guy running the facility says, I just want to turn my lights off. Can you
Yeah.
just help me out and turn them
Yeah. I
off?
was I was going
So
to ask that. I was going to ask if how much of the initial installation commissioning, how often do you have to go back and just give them a light switch? How often does that happen?
they ask pretty frequently about how to use it and implement it. And sometimes that's turnover. And when the building went up, there was somebody else running it, and they had turnover, and the new
Hmm.
guy coming in needs to be brought up to speed on it. So I'd say that's a common one. And having a good controls partner. And we've now had to bring sort of controls expertise in house with somebody that speaks that language and can do that, so it helps
Hmm.
them. It helps us navigate it for our clients when it comes up.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Is what do you have somebody that's dedicated only to that, given your size? And it sounds like you do that. Just manages everything that comes up, any commissioning that might come up down the road too.
Yeah, he's sort of like an in-house subject matter expert with controls
There's a
being his
name for
strength.
him. He's a controls integrator. He's a
There you
controls
go.
integrator. That no, I'm serious.
Yeah,
We do a podcast with that on our platform here with Ron Kuzmar and Webb Marsh, and all they talk about is controls. And I listen to it for out of curiosity, not as a listener. I listen to it, and they're
hmm,
calling that trade a controls integrator, someone that
yeah,
specializes in multi different types of controls packages, integrating them, managing them remotely, and things like that. So the way the industry is going now is that an FSG will drill into your facility with an IP address and just address those control issues from his office in Texas or wherever that fellow is in FSG, and he'll configure it there to avoid the trips out. It's that advanced. They can do all that
yeah.
kind of stuff now. Yeah.
And I think integrators, that's a really good word to say it, because those are the people that can come in and tie all the pieces together and make it work for the end user. So our kind of we do that in smart buildings where we're controlling other things beyond the lighting. So I think the HVAC industry, for example, is probably a lot more advanced in utilization of those controls.
Mm.
Now, how's the you guys were big at one point into, maybe you still are, in UV lighting, like deploying. You had
Mhm.
different systems and setups. Are you still seeing a lot of demand for that?
Well, UV and UVC, that was the first sort of wave of the pandemic, as everybody said,
Mm.
what can we do to kill this? So there was a lot of initial demand, but I think that's tapered. Um, it's as we've learned to live with the thing, there's less of that out there. And UV, it went from UV to kind of air purification, ionization inside the atmosphere and kind of cleaning it that way. So we saw that kind of high interest. Everybody talked about it nonstop for probably 3 or 4 months there, and then utilization occurred. Less of that today. So I think there's probably it exists out there. More people are aware of it, but it doesn't have that sort of screaming to the front of the line effect that it had a year and a half ago.
The air purification piece is actually, you have the filtration guys in the space that
Mm-hmm.
they want to use filters and this sort of thing, but filters won't capture a virus the size of COVID-19 or whatever these small aerosol airborne viruses. The lighting play is truly effective. It just never caught the imagination of the public, and there was an opportunity there, and I felt it where it could have been. I offered it to multiple private schools. This is
Mm-hmm.
but they went with surface disinfection for some reason with these push around carts. And I,
Yeah.
I thought to myself, like, how did we mix this up so badly when the air, the passive and active air disinfection has been around for 40 years. They've been doing it in tuberculosis wards since the 70s. They know it works. and you can
Yeah.
conceal it inside a a 2x4 trough, or there's no chance of anybody being hurt by it or anything. But for some reason, the public was captivated by this surface disinfection play, which really is not has
Yeah.
nothing to do with killing COVID-19.
Right. Yeah. It's I, I don't know. I think one of the things we learned through all of that is we didn't know what we didn't know, and
Mm,
then what we thought we knew we didn't know either. So
mm,
we were we were all on a level playing field about what we didn't know.
mm,
So,
I got to wonder too on some of those, and I sold some of the push around carts and things. Are people still using
mhm.
them? That bottom was that
ah,
just a fad
good
that they
question.
came in and did it, and now they are parked in a supply room somewhere?
Similar to control systems, right?
Exactly. Right.
Ah, jeez.
That might be what the case is, but what else are you guys seeing, Steve? In terms outside of, I know you do a lot more than lighting, but where are you doing a lot with EV charging? Is that a big push for
EV
FSG?
charging is, yeah, very
Mm,
big right now, and they're, the guys that are providing EV charging equipment are they're it feels a little bit like when LED first burst on, right? Everybody in the world was an LED guy and
mm,
bringing LED lamps to market. So there's an awful lot of people doing LED charging. I think there's a high demand for that as we
mhm,
push towards electric cars everywhere. That's not going to go away. So kind of the install, getting it in place is one piece, and then it's the sort of aftermarket of that of how do commercial facilities create revenue off of that. So,
yeah.
and again, that gets into hotels that have got EV stations that they're going to let you charge your car overnight and add it to your bill, that kind of thing. So, I think that's going to be strong for a while. And then also, anytime there's government funding behind it, and I think there's quite a bit been allocated for EV charging, it's going to drive it. It's like lighting. If I think back over the years of how much lighting upgrades and retrofits were driven by those programs that subsidized it, that really
Mm.
moves the needle and gets stuff in place. So I think we're going to see that with EV charging as well.
So you
You know,
guys are in, you expand coast to coast. Are you seeing it heavy on the east and west and nothing in the middle, or all over the place?
I think we're seeing it, and it's talked about in almost all of our markets that
mm,
we're in, and then and some of it might be because of our client base. So if we have national account clients that have facilities in those markets and they want EV charging in all their facilities, that it's going to come up there. So um, and it will. I think that the demand will follow the incentive. So wherever the strongest incentives are is where you'll see the highest demand.
And one thing as I look at EV chargers for myself, and I see that a lot of the uh, companies that make them are actually selling them, and a lot of times we're
hmm
quoting the install
Yes.
side of it, um,
Yeah,
and that's where it gets hard to manage. And so I guess you're
it's a
seeing the same thing, Steve. That's one.
yeah, it's a blurring of the lines on the channels to market are not as clear cut as they historically have been, and
Mm,
I think is you've got manufacturers with product to move, and they've got to get there. So it's a speed to market issue, and they're going to go with whoever gets them there the fastest. And if that's themselves, they're going to do that. So I think maybe that a lot of those lines have maybe been permanently blurred in a lot of industries. That
yeah, I agree.
the internet's done that, right? It's made information and it's made transactions accessible to just about anybody. So people are going to pick and choose their fastest path and where they get the most, I think, support for what it is they're trying to do.
And you touched on it a little bit with the how EV chargers work once they get it. They either paid for it or they're getting reoccurring revenue for it. And are you
Mhm.
guys in any agreements as the installers of a lot of these that you're actually getting paid ongoing reoccurring revenue from it?
Yeah, so that almost again is similar to a controls play. It's okay. Who's going to monitor the information? What was the
Mm,
usage
Right.
on it,
mm,
and how much was there? So being able to that's a data play. Who has the data and can make the data, monetize the data for whether it's the facility, and if you're doing that for them, then there's a service there. So it could be it can run the gamut. It can go, everything's on them and they figure that out themselves, through metering and measurement, or you support them in that and you're gathering, collecting the data, reporting it, and there's a fee for it. It's a service. So it's an after the sale, after the install service that people are looking at.
FSG, like in terms of size of company, it's in like a sweet
Mhm.
spot. So it's in maybe a not sour spot too when it came to some of the benefits from COVID. But like you guys are you're nimble because you kind of have a solid management group that's been there for a long time, that's built the business. You guys are mostly still there. I don't know how many people have changed, but obviously you've been there 38 years. But you're big enough to really look at something like EV charging very strategically. Whereas the average lighting distributor, to look at EV charging, try to deal with a Bosch, say, or a Charge Point. They're going to give you 10 points. So they're going to give you 5 points on the
Mhm.
sale of the thing. That's not how our businesses work, you know.
Right.
Um, and then the other side of it is that actually implementing a fair amount of chargers is a major electrical renovation on a building. Like if you're in an existing
Mhm.
building and you want to put 40 chargers into that building, you got to change the switch gear or something. Like you got to bring another line in from the utility because these things use a lot of energy. And on their
Yeah.
startups, and I know they're getting better with that, kind of like shedding it and controlling it, and there's different types of things that you can do. To me, the average lighting distributor, the one off owner operated, 15 people work there, whatever it is, that's a difficult um, uh, uh, thing to kind of take
It,
on board. You know what I'm saying?
it
And are you
yeah.
guys in FSG even struggling with something like that?
Well, I think so if it was just the lighting side of the business and all of the folks that are focused on lighting distribution trying to do that, it would be a really stretch to try and
Mm,
reach it. That's where the other side of our business, which has the electrical expertise, the technicians and all of the people that are familiar with how that goes in and that can do the things like you said. Okay, it's more than just mounting three charging stations here. You got to say, what does that do to the switch gear back at the building, and how do you do that? Being able to access that expertise in house with you know the folks that we have, I think is something that gives us sort of an added value for the user out there. They can talk the language better, so it's a much stronger play in that arena versus if it was if I was just running the distribution business, saying, okay, I'm ready to jump into EV charging. I,
yeah.
it's a lot more complex than converting
It's
a
more about
clientele. They do
electrical building operational equipment knowledge, load, how big the cable coming in from the utility is, and it's not really about chargers. That's the easiest part of it is drilling the
yeah,
charger into the concrete and wiring it up. That's nothing actually.
yeah, following the code, making sure it's
Yeah,
all sized right, and all of that. So,
yeah.
and with that comes a tremendous amount of liability too. So you have to do that right, and most and unless I'd say for lighting distributors, that's an opportunity if that's something they want to go sell, and there's almost if you're purely lighting focused and now you're going to go ask your guys, hey, I want you to start pushing EV charging, you're taking them way out of their comfort zone of what they're used to. And you have to have a partner then at that point too, because the install, you're going to need some contractor friends to help you get that put in.
Mm.
I agree with that.
I got so many notes here as Greg took over the show there earlier. I was just making notes here, and I want to talk to you though a little bit about this renaissance and the possibilities that you mentioned when we started
Mhm.
off. A renaissance. So when people say a renaissance, what you're saying is a reigniting of the interest in higher ideas or bigger ideas, right? And that's
Mhm.
what a renaissance is. That's what Michelangelo, Leonardo. So when you're referencing a renaissance, we're actually raising the status of the industry's intellect to see something bigger. That's what I kind
Mhm.
of think of when you said that. What do you mean when you say there's so many possibilities in lighting and we're going to experience a renaissance? What do you mean by that?
I think so on the commercial side, as I think about, and some of it's tied to control, some of it's tied to what light sources can do now. They're varying color temperature, they're varying lumen output, they're doing all of these things right at the fixture itself. The opportunities for shaping the way spaces look are almost endless now. And then the sheer ability of LED to scale downward to become smaller lumen packages. You mentioned your discussion on the TCP corncob killer, right? I mean, who would have thought
Exactly.
a 200 lumen per watt unit that looks like what people are used to seeing in an LED lamp was going to be available when LED came out. It's it reminded you all remember when CFLs first hit the market, right? CFLs are great, and they were really ugly. I mean, they
We're
didn't
not
fit
that
into
old,
anything.
Steve. We're not that
Okay.
old, bud.
We're
I'm
close.
sorry. Well, that's my recollection of CFLs. They're really ugly. They don't fit right, but everybody was in a rush to put them in because they saved
Sure.
energy. And then by the time CFLs reached saturation and were on the way out because LED was coming in, they looked really good. They looked like traditional light sources. LED,
Isn't that
much the
true? Yeah.
same way. LED came in and looked maybe a little funny at first. You know, they were bright, they were glary, they were kind of funny components stuck on them. And now you're talking about a corncob killer that looks like an HID lamp delivering those kind of lumens. That's pretty cool what's happening. And those are just the sources, right? Those are the sources we're used to seeing in kind of traditional applications.
I was just about to
Step.
ask you that. I'm going to interrupt here because I want to ask you about sustainability on that note.
Mhm.
We've seen a lot of fixtures deployed in the last 10 years that are not maintainable, repairable in any way, shape, or form. You can't relamp them.
Yeah.
You can't change a driver.
Yeah.
How, when you look at an FSG from your perspective, obviously you're selling less and less legacy lamps, probably like, whatever it's in the single digits now in terms of your revenue. But you're looking at these fixtures we've been deploying. Do you ever step back and say, this is not actually good for the industry? The way we did the CFLs was better because we created integrated base GX23, and all lamps had to be made to this size, this shape, fit in that socket. We had to, we went from T12 to T8 to T5, but everyone could make that same lamp and it was replaceable, and they could make the ballast and it was replaceable. And so I think the way
Yeah.
that the CFL revolution was handled by lighting people who thought through all the way to the end. The difference between that and the LED is it almost seems like everybody was swinging through the trees with a knife in their teeth, trying to make anything they could.
Yeah.
And how do you think do we need to switch to a sustainable, repairable, maintainable model where we insist that manufacturers meet these form factors and meet these cross compatibility criteria and what have you? Or are we just going to keep it Wild West?
I think it's a difficult question, but what comes to mind is that's part of the Renaissance opportunity. Form factors will change. You can now light a room because you have an entire wall that can become a light source through OLED or something like that. So, form factors are now open field for anybody that can come up with one that's unique, new, and interesting. And I think that probably is going to triumph the ability to replace and maintain something that's going to look the same for 10 years. I think people are open to change a lot more now, and they want to see these new things. And as people become more creative in how to apply light in these spaces, the Wild West is probably going to be there for a while. So, and I can tell you, I think I grew up traditional lamps. Boy, bring them in the back of the warehouse and push them out the front, and you could. It was fairly repetitive, and it was. I never realized how simple the business used to be. Thought it was hard at the time,
Right.
but it used to be simple. More complex now, but selling fixtures is a whole lot more fun. And light fixtures into the market is it's a different animal, different path to market, but it's a lot more fun. The results are a lot more kind of I don't know, stimulating when you see them.
I
So
agree with you.
that
I think you're right. I think I do another show called the Sustainable Light Fixture Show where there's people actually pushing for like a ANSI standard or a NEMA standard for LED light sources. I think that they're going to get railroaded. Me included, the people pushing that. I think it's going to be very tough. But, I think in the opposite direction, you need to see some standards come out for the controls. interoperability
Yeah.
standards. I think we're going to continue to see the Wild West on the fixtures and on the light sources wall, like whole walls of light, and because they're talking about vertical light being so much more important than horizontal light. But we all knew that
Mhm.
from the fluorescent, the metal halide to fluorescent boom. When you put so much light on the walls of a factory, they thought it was brighter, even though it was less light on the meter horizontally. So we all knew that kind of by our guts that that's very important. But I think we have to get these control manufacturers. We have to find a way to herd these cats together and say, look, you guys get one or two protocols. That's it. You're done.
Yeah.
And they have to be interoperable. And then somebody's got to be control of software updates. One place that's in control of it, because otherwise you're going to end up with the balkanization of the lighting controls industry.
Yeah. That's a tough one, and I think it was we probably can learn some lessons from the HVAC people there too. With there was a lot of different, I think, controls platforms for those things, and I know, and that's way outside of my area of
Mm-hmm.
expertise. But I know there's a lot of discussion about BACnet compatible and the control system that could talk to all of them. So I think the world is still in search of that universal translator that brings everything together and speaks one language back out to everything
Well,
else.
no, we have that. That exists in the software world. That already
Hmm.
XML, JSON, all these different ways of integrating information. They're purposely not doing it. That's the problem. Like the people that
Yeah,
are making the controls are making them not be compatible with one another on purpose because they want to be the Apple or the Google.
yeah. I think generally where there's some source of confusion and something, the person that understands that confusion is who benefits from it. So
Hmm.
there, there, there's probably some self protection in that.
You talked a little bit also about monetizing the data, and I thought that was such an interesting idea because I've often felt to myself that when you use Google, for example, you're not the customer, you're the product. When you
Yeah.
use Facebook, you're not the customer, you're the product, right? So that whole software industry went through a transition where you bought a disk from Microsoft, you put it on the computer, you downloaded the software, and it was yours, and you were Microsoft's customer. That's completely
Hmm.
changed now. You're the product of these companies that they sell. Okay.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, the only way where you're going to see significant penetration into these buildings is if the lighting system, which is the most pervasive and can be Li-Fi enabled and can two-way Li-Fi, and Li-Fi can actually see moving objects. It's starting to be able to identify things, right? If we were able to, and as dark and as conspiratorial as that sounds, if you were able to turn these things into information that was actually valuable, people would give away the
Hmm.
light fixtures for free. And
Yes.
I think
Then
that's, go ahead. Yeah,
subscription service. You have the subscription service. Then they're
right.
subscribing to the information that you're pumping back to them. So
Yes, and it's like you're
it,
almost like the gear you give away. You give them the free phone, so they sign up for the AT&T wireless
right.
subscription a month, right?
But then you
Can we
then
go
you
there?
start get you
Oh,
start
sorry.
giving
Go
them
ahead.
apps, right? You start
Yeah.
giving them apps and say, oh, you want to monitor room occupancy? That's this app. Oh, you
Hmm.
want to monitor cloud coverage on these days and dim the lights this much? That's this app. So I don't know, but that's what sort of comes to mind is we live in an app world that,
Hmm.
that's on your phone, and you know maybe lighting systems are going to go that same direction. So
Yeah. Beyond illumination, there's something there. Um, and so my final note here that I was making while we were actually there's a couple other ones, but kind of answered. You were talking about the supply chain issues, and
mhm.
so here at Atlas, we have a warehouse, we got an order desk, we have projects, whatever. We're doing what we do, similar to you guys, but on a smaller scale. And so the supply chain issues are usually solved by, hey, Mike, you're out of this. Do you know where we can get this? And I'm like, you know what? Get Jared from TCP on the line. Get this guy on the line. Call up this guy over here, and this sort of thing. And that's how we solve the supply chain issues at Atlas. Ask Michael. That's the strategy. Because I know so many people. But a business like yours, you got multiple branches. You got lots of different things going on. How do you guys look at a supply chain issue when you have projects booked and you're not sure if there's going to be tubes available or fixtures are backordered? How do you look at it sort of above the fray? Like, I'm in the business. I'm not working on the business. I'm working in my business. You guys have the opportunity to kind of look at trends and strategies. How did you guys handle the supply chain situation?
Well, it's real and it's out there, but the best we could do is mitigate, bad outcomes, and that was entirely contingent upon really open communication throughout the supply chain. So from the user that can give you some kind of picture of demand and what they're going to do and what their expectations are, and taking that and communicating that all the way back to the manufacturers that you're going to put in place. Because at the manufacturing level, they're all about, okay, we can put in orders for components, we're going to have drivers and chips and that kind of thing, but we got to kind of have some demand. They don't build anything until they have POs now. But if you can communicate that activity that's coming, and then you have some kind of a track record of reliability on that, and you take some risks too, right? And we've had to do that. We've had to take some risks in those areas and say, you know what, we're going to hedge a little bit on this forecast, and we're going to put this sort of inventory at risk and put it in play to support these schedules, because we've seen this track record of that their schedule hits 95% of the time, and you can go
Mm,
that way. So that communication is paramount. Knowing early and often about changes within that, and that's the only way we've found to keep some sanity. And yet we had to, you can't just hold that in as a distributor and do that. You've got to link back to your manufacturing partners and say, this is the situation, and I got to know how you can help with that. And there's varying degrees of help that they'll bring to that situation. Some of them will say, okay, you've told me this, I'm going to double my components for drivers on my next go round
mm,
and do that. And then that helps that when the demand hits, they at least can put the components together and build it and get it out. And then you have a hope of keeping your client on his schedule, because that in the new build world where they're rolling out multiple sites and trying to build things, the more you can not be the guy that made the schedule go awry or
mm,
cause the delays, the more likely you are to get that next order from them. And
yeah,
so that's been an important piece in supply chain. And I don't know if it's true. I've thought about this a lot because I keep hearing these sort of stories in talking to people that, when the first noise about supply chain disruptions was happening. And at first it was, okay, COVID's here and the world shut down, people aren't working. And then it was ships getting stuck in the canals and things being bottled up at ports. And then who knows what else is causing all this stuff to be stacked up where it is now. A lot of people double and triple ordered demand that they thought they had. And I think I don't know, there's a part of me, and you can say this is the black helicopters flying around my head here, that there's been this demand that's overstated, that's piled up out on containers and barges and
mm,
inside of factory components. And at some point,
mm,
when that shakes loose, maybe that's going to be, maybe that's not a renaissance. It's the opposite of whatever a renaissance is.
yeah,
It's going to be a glut of material that people are looking to get rid of and dump. So I don't know if that's going to happen or not. That's my old brain speculating. So
sure. That's yeah, no, that's the lizard brain coming through and saying your gut telling you what's going to happen. But it's interesting, guy. I could go so many different directions, but I'm just going to say this: it's so much different when you get to a certain size of business. What he's talking about, their trends. You have your regionality. You can see things that you have almost like a greater visibility. That's super interesting. And what you talked about how the distributor is um, through trusted partnerships is providing his manufacturer partners with for like a sense of forecasting, like, or something. There's demand coming, and
yeah,
and you can rely on us to buy from you because we're trusted partners, and not everything's about price with us. It's also about, like what you talked about, delivering on time and these other things. That's what the EV charger guys need to hear. That
Mhm.
the go direct model is, there's a reason why there's lighting distributors in 2022 and why they're all,
Yeah.
in fact, they're doing well. And there's
Mhm.
dealerships, there's still car dealerships out there. There's a reason why this exists. And whether you like the dealership model or you like a distribution model where a distributor, the difference between dealership and distributor meaning multiple brands, one single brand for a certain product, right? That would be the difference.
Mhm.
But these models are effective and they work, and there's reasons why they work, and they work a little different now, but generally the principles are there. Um,
Yeah.
Greg, did you have any final questions for Steve?
I do, yeah, and it relates really well to this topic, and I think you kind of implied your answer there, but I'm going to ask it. So 2 years ago, again, I go back to that. You said you feel the end users are going to put partnerships ahead of brand recognition, or you said that word, and to me that means
Mhm.
what's happening in the market, and I'm seeing it is the people we're selling to don't know what they're buying. They don't usually know the brand. I mean, that's my instance. I think it's Mike's. I think
Mhm.
it sounds like maybe yours, Steve. Not all the time, but more often than not, it's you know what you're doing. Get me the right stuff. Are you, as FSG or your company, are you guys partnering closer with manufacturers now than you were before, or are you working with more manufacturers?
We work with a lot, but we really value a handful that we work closely with. I don't, maybe the 80-20 rule really is a rule of life that
Mm,
is out there because you, you can only have so much complexity in how you execute. Every manufacturer you work with adds a different level of complexity of how you work with them. And then if you want to deliver consistency, you want to deliver reliability, you want to have that good communication link. I can do that 15 times, right? I can't do it 1,500 times effectively. At least I haven't figured that out yet. So that, that that does apply. So I think the ones that you work closely with, you hold really close and you work really close with them. And I would say business is just a whole lot more fun and a lot less stressful when you're working that way than if every single kind of situation is a jump ball and you're in
yeah.
there fighting for it.
Mm.
So that's sort of how I'm wired. I would choose stability, reliability, and consistency over sort of the sheer volatility of you know holy crap, I can really blow this thing up if I make the wrong decision here. So,
I just looked at the clock. We spoke for 42 minutes here. Holy mackerel! I can't believe that. That just went by like that. But you know what? You know what I was thinking of when you said that? It's kind of like the old adage: "Don't put all your eggs in one basket." But I'm going to add something to that. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, but don't put every egg in one basket either. Not
Yeah,
a basket for every egg. Like, you
yeah,
want to be able to, like, you want to be able to reward a good supplier. You want to give them regular business so that you become a preferred client. You have a relationship with them. And
yeah.
so, yeah, I totally agree. Steve, do you have any final thoughts for the nailed and get a grip on lighting listeners out there?
I think that group is because of their love for lighting and the place that they fit into it. They are this conduit of everything that's happening in all these local markets all across the country, and they see it there first. They're going to see and understand what clients are talking about and what they're wanting. So they're going to continue to be a vital part of how lighting gets to market out there. I think as they stretch their capabilities, they can serve more. I got to spend some time with Greg and getting to know him a little bit better. I'm in awe of the guys like him that in their market can command the value, deliver the value, and actually run a really good business in doing
Mm,
that. So lighting distribution, I'm biased. I mean, it's all I've done for
mm,
40 years. I love it. I don't think lighting distribution is going away. The Amazons of the world or whatever are going to do their thing, but there's still genuine value to be had in local market knowledge, local market relationships, and then communicating how to best effectively serve those customers out there. So there's art and science in lighting that keeps it exciting, fun, and fresh all of the time. And then there's also the distribution piece, as I call it, the dirty knuckle work somebody's got to get that product to the site. So
Hmm.
NAILD is in a good position. So,
Well, we're glad to have
Okay.
FSG as a member, Greg. And you know what else?
What's
We got
that?
to talk about another longtime vendor member of Nailed, and that's the crazy people, man. The craziest folks in lighting. TCPI.com, Greg Garrick, let it rip.
Well, I think Scott's going to put it up on screen, but the corn cob killer, yeah, it's real, man. 200 lumens per watt. We talked about it before the show, during the show, and now after. You better check that thing out because it is unique and it fits that HID size that you're used to. So no messing around with pulling out reflectors, removing lenses, none of that. Fits.
I can't wait to get my hands on one of those, brother. I'm not kidding you. Like sometimes a product comes across and you're like, you know what? If it burns out, I can give him another one. Yeah. Okay. Good. I can just change it out. Yeah. That sounds like really cool, actually. So go to tcpi.com. We love Ellis and all the folks down there. You guys are great. And of course, if you folks are coming to the convention, why not? ArcLight Summit and Nailed, kicking it hot together in September. That's right. Nailed of it. What is it? We don't even have a name for our convention yet, Greg. We don't even have a theme. We got to get working on this thing.
Who
But it's
needs
going
a
to go down.
name? You
It
know it's
needs a
good.
name. It needs a name. It needs a name. But it's going to be in Dallas, Texas. That's right. At the what do they call that place where the ArcLight thing is called again? The Dallas Market Center.
Market Center,
Market
yeah.
Center. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's going to be awesome for the vendors, and there's going to be lots of great other content from ArcLight. So it's going to be super fun. So check it out, guys. Go to naild.org and gals. Check it out, gals too. naild.org, and of course we thank Steve Byrne, Executive Vice President of FSG. What a pleasure it was to have him on the show. I mean, I loved the last one, and even Greg's review of it. I'm going to go back and listen to it too. 129, Greg.
you got it.
Episode 129, and of course this one. And if you made it to all the way to the end, like so many of you guys and gals do out there, hey, we love you guys. Bye for now.